job of introducing our speakers. So on this morning, we're going to have 3 amazing speakers, and I can't wait to hear all of the information that they have to share with us. So first up, we're going to have our speaking to us about civil rights is going to be Mrs. Dorothy Count-Scoggins, who was 15 years old when she began her journey as one of the 4 African-American students to change inequality in education in Charlotte by integrating Hardin High School. We're also going to hear about legacy from Lemuel Fraunberger. Okay, I practiced, so if it's not correct, please correct me. Who is a graduate of class of 53 from Lincoln Academy. And then after that, we'll hear from Lisa R. Withers, an AHA-NEH fellow through the Gaston County Museum, who's actually a doctoral student in NC State. And we're going to hear about all of the things to come as it pertains to the historical recognition that the pastor has already mentioned, and a couple of other things that hopefully we're all going to learn from today. So in that order, if those 3 people will come. Thank you. Can we just give her a hand as she comes?
Is it possible that you could come and speak? She explained to me about the sorority, what you all were all about, and if you could come and speak to us during Black History Month. And I said to her, she said, we don't have any money. And I said, well, that's okay. You don't have to have any. Yes, I do speak. I speak across the country. I speak in other places. But at the same time, this is because of who you are, not only, but because of what you're doing, that I chose to do what I do. So this morning, I'm going to sort of kind of divide it up for you. And I'm going to, first of all, as we talk about Black History Month that we're celebrating, I'm going to talk about that. Then I'm going to talk about the experience that I had in terms of education, trying to change the education system in this country. And then I'm going to also talk about what's going on with our children today. Because as I said earlier, at my age, as long as I can use my buddy here and get out, so I'm still fighting for the children. Not only do I fight for the children where I live, but I fight for, I think, that which I do to make a change for the children across the country. And that has always been my goal. So, let's start out by talking about the celebration of Black History. Why do we celebrate Black History Month? It began as Negro History Week, which was created in 1926 by Dr. Carter Woodson, a noted African-American publisher, scholar, educator, historian, and founder of the study of African-American life history. Dr. Carter was one of the first African-Americans to receive his doctorate from Harvard University and dedicated his career to the field of African American history. And he also lobbied extensively to establish Black History Month as a nationwide institution. He once wrote that if you teach the Negro that he has accomplished as much good as any other race, he will inspire to equality and justice without regard to race. Woodson also understood well the implications associated with the denial of access barriers to equal education. It became a month-long celebration in 1976. The month of February was chosen to coincide with the birthdays of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. As we celebrate Black History Month, I'd like to use as my theme this afternoon the crucial role of education in the history of African Americans. So why have I chosen this? I've chosen education as education of our children because of my experience in our education system 66 years ago. Also because I'm in the midst this afternoon with members of Phi Delta Kappa, a professional organization of teachers that are dedicated to the task of educating the youth of America. As I read your philosophy and purpose of your sorority, we have the same mission in serving our youth of today. Even though I was not destined to be a teacher, as many of you are, or the majority of my family members are, but I was destined to ensure that the children have the opportunity to have the equal education that they so deserve. Through my work in the field of early childhood education and my advocacy, I hope that I have contributed at least a small part to ensure that our youth have this opportunity. We have all gone through different phases in our lives, but the pandemic affected the lives of so many of us in so many different ways. Its effect on our education system, the children, the educators across the country have suffered a crisis in education. But for us as African Americans, this is not our first time. The crisis in Black education first began in the days of slavery, when it was unlawful for slaves to learn to read and write. In pre-Civil War northern cities, free blacks were forced as children to walk along distance paths and past white schools on their way to another school, relegated solely for them. As a child in that era, not in that era, but I remember doing the same thing living in Charlotte, that I would have to walk past the school that was closest to me to go to the school that I was assigned to. But not only that, I also remember, as I tell children today, and I also tell parents, you think in terms of the little yellow school bus? I remember when we couldn't ride the little yellow school bus. We, as African American children, had to walk to school, and I remember us walking to school, and either our parents would take us to school or we'd walk to school. So when I hear people talk about, I don't want my child to ride the bus, I say, you have to remember there was a time when we could not ride the bus. So, whether by law, policies, or practices, racially separated schools remained the norm in America in the late 19th century, well into our own time. Throughout the last quarter of the 20th century, and counting today, the crisis in Black education has grown significantly in urban neighborhoods where public schools lack resources. We endure overcrowding, exhibit a racial achievement gap, and confront policies that fail to deliver essential opportunities. The publicized benefits of education remain elusive to many Blacks of of all ages. Tragically, some poorly performing schools serve as pipelines to prison freedom. Yet African American history is rich, centuries old. Efforts of resistance to this crisis, slaves' secret endeavors to learn, the rise of black colleges and universities after the Civil War, unrelenting battles in the courts, Black History Movement, the Freedom Schools of 1960, and local community-based academic and mentorship programs that inspired a love of learning and a thirst for achievement. Addressing the crisis in black education should be considered one of the most important goals in America's past, America's present, and America's future. Now I'm going to share with you a little bit about this. My grandparents and my parents instilled in us at a very young age the importance of education, acceptance of others, respect for others, and the importance of self-worth. As a child, I observed both my grandparents and my parents and how they took leadership roles in our communities, empowering others to take a strong stand on their beliefs and share with us that in order for us to make changes in the world, we must be a part of the solution. 63 years ago, Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, which was landmarked a United States Supreme Court case in which the court declared state laws establishing separate public schools for blacks and white students to be unconstitutional. My own city had not moved forward on this decision. Therefore, 3 years later, in 1957, as a young 15-year-old girl, along with 3 other black students, decided to take a walk of faith to challenge the education system of this country. Under much pressure by African-American faith leaders and civil rights leaders of Charlotte, the school board agreed, under much opposition, that schools in this community were breaking the law. They did not necessarily agree with the decision of the ruling of 1954, Brown, nor felt that the community was ready for the decision, but now it was the law of the land, and morally, the opportunity should be opened up to African-American families and their children. One was to attend Central High School, one was to attend Piedmont Middle School, one was to attend Alexander Graham Middle School, and one was to attend Harding High School. As I approached the crowds of hundreds of protesters, including students and adults that morning, I was in awe that I would be denied the opportunity to pursue the education that I so desired, but was also entitled to as an American citizen and face the hatred and the bigotry that lay ahead for me. I remembered the words of my father that morning. You can do anything that you want to do. No one can stand in your way. You are not inferior to anyone. And hold your head up high and be proud of who you are. Determination prevented me from breaking down to students and adults, hurling racial slurs to me, telling me, "Nigga, go back to Africa. We do not want you here." I was pushed and shoved on the walk while female students were being told by an adult to spit on me, which is the most humiliating thing that any individual could experience. My thoughts were, but who but a coward? Who but a coward would spit on a child and then deny them the right to an education? It's simply because of the color of their skin. But through all of this pride emanating from my face, as I carried myself with dignity, when met with such hatred and humiliation, I continued to walk with dignity, and I truly believed that I was doing what was right. And I was not inferior to no one. The intensity of those beliefs drowned out the pain of the despicable insults that encircled me, enabled me to continue my journey as I had on my head up high with pride as spit dripped from the bottom of my dress. Of course, there were warnings. There were signs of a difficult journey for me. Threats, phone calls, but I knew nothing of them. My parents wanted to protect me from the immoral stupidity of a bigoted society. Today I still feel that my father tried to forewarn me in his own way as the family gathered at the dinner table during the weeks prior to my first day. My parents instilled in us strong values of respect, honor, and character. The night before our conversations were for me to have strength was the way of preparing me for the obstacles that lay ahead. From these conversations, I gained the power and the confidence needed to embark on the most significant journey of my life. Inside was not any different. Ignored by teachers and administrators while tucked away in the back of the classroom, it was very clear that they were not going to acknowledge my existence. I wanted them to know that I was prepared to participate, eager to learn, ready to share priceless lessons that only I could share. They ignored me, my efforts were in vain, and my contributions were discounted. My peers continued to push and shove me in the halls, stairwells, walkways, and also disrespected me while eating lunch by spitting in my food. All of this made me more determined to hold on to my dignity and try to get them to understand that I was a young 15-year-old girl that was trying to seek her place in this country with the rights and privileges that any American should have. The opportunity to receive a quality education. I eventually found a small flicker of light in the dark, lonely tunnel. I found a friendly face. It was somewhat a familiar face. Our paths had crossed on the very first day. She too was a new student. We talked and we shared experiences. Suddenly I didn't feel so alone. But quickly as the flame of hope had ignited, it was extinguished. The very next day, as we passed in the hallway, my newfound friend ignored me. Our eyes met, and she looked away. Guilt and discomfort were displayed all over her face. Her friendship, my only source of comfort within the school, was snatched away. Deep down, I understood it. One was accepted, the other was ostracized. The white community would have despised our association, and I knew firsthand that they would not hesitate to express the intensity of their displeasure. My friend had no choice but to withdraw her friendship. Yes, the smell hurt, far more than the sticks and stones ever did. I was discouraged, downtrodden, and dejected, but still there was a tiny sparkle of hope that everything would be all right. I suffered 3 brutal and agonizing days. I was reminded every minute of every day that I was not wanted. I never hung my head and never afraid. On my 4th day, I was hit in the back of my head with a sharp object and a blackboard eraser in the middle of my back before leaving school for lunch. When I walked outside, I stared at the shattered window of my parents' car with my brother sitting inside. My mistreatment was one thing, but providing to a small-minded extremist that I had the right to an education was not worth endangering mine. My parents felt that I had endured enough, and that I was not being allowed to get the education that I so desired, that my father called for a press conference and included family and close friends together to share our decision to withdraw me from Harding High School. I had not expected the violence and the hatred that confronted me. I had been protected from the ills of the world, even though I lived in a segregated world. I was aware of the existence of other races, other cultures, other religions. They were merely communities that I had not yet had the opportunity to be a part of. I could not grasp the idea of being rejected by my white counterparts simply because of the color of my skin. I thought that once my peers got to know who I was, that they would see that I was like them in so many ways. I was a mere child, forced to endure the inequities of a segregated society. I, like every child, had to desire to belong. It took a great deal of strength for me to admit that I had reached the end of that journey, departing from the entire world, watching and waiting for the slightest sign of fate. I was trusting of others that they would see the individual that I was, but I realized that I was ahead of my time. The white community was not ready for me. They were neither prepared nor willing to make the concessions that unity and solidarity demanded. As I reflect on these days, I never felt anything but remorse for my peers. I cannot fault them for what they had been taught. I realized that our teachings were different. I grew up in a community where we were taught love. They were taught hatred. I was taught acceptance, and they were taught intolerance. I was taught to forgive, and they were taught to retaliate. I was taught to respect, and they were taught to ridicule and stigmatize. I know that I was chosen by God to be his servant, to lead the way for others. I believe that the prayers of my family, friends, and community leaders were answered. God had a plan for me. I was the one chosen. He knew that it would be my calling. This was the beginning of another journey for me. I vowed that I would work to make sure that what happened to me would never happen to another child. This experience of not being accepted and judged and scorned and harassed and ridiculed was part of my thoughts. It shaped my attitudes and has shaped my choices. This has made me the person that I am today, a defender of acceptance. In 2001, the court decision was challenged again, and the judge this time decided that the schools were desegregated. Therefore, the Board of Education approved a non-race plan, which led to the current system that we now have, schools of choice, our neighborhood schools. Charlotte was growing, and neighborhoods were changing, which are not always diverse. Development was occurring in suburban areas in the city. Therefore, overcrowding occurred, which led to schools being built, which began the segregation of schools all over again. Now, I have shared with you the past. Let's kind of look a little bit at the future, at the present. Although it's been 69 years since the Supreme Court's Brown versus Board of Education decision establishing that separate schools for white students and black students are not equal, many of our schools across the nation remain very economically and racially segregated. Racially and segregated schools harm our community. When children are not effectively educated, they cannot thrive in today's global society. A large pool of poorly educated residents holds a community back. Recent studies have placed my city, Charlotte, near the bottom of the nation in terms of social mobility. This is defined as the ability to individuals or groups to move forward or downward in status based on wealth, occupation, education, or some other social variable, in part because of our large number of high-poverty schools. Charlotte was once a national model for school innovation. Charlotte schools have regressed perhaps more than any other major city in the United States. Day 1 and 3 of Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools is isolated by class, meaning at least 80% of their students live in poverty. 1/2 of our schools are isolated by race, meaning at least 80% of our students are of one race. In 1 in 5 schools, 95% of our students are all of the same race, which is termed hyper-segregation. So my question is, does segregation currently impact our students in public schools? Yes, it does. Students' quality of education suffers in a segregated school environment. In schools with a proportionately high concentration of students of color, school facilities in most cases are poor. Students are instructed by less experienced teachers. And I'm not saying that includes you all, but that does happen, and we know it. They have less advanced placement courses, they have less resources, and they receive more expulsion and suspensions, especially our black males. Studies have also shown that students who attend segregated schools make slower progress in reading. In 2022, the North Carolina Center of Education Statistics conducted a special administration of the National Assessment of Educational Progress. NAEP, Long-Term Plan, LTT, reading and mathematics assessments for age 9-year-old students to examine student achievement from the COVID-19 pandemic. Average scores for age 9-year-old students in 2022 declined 5 points in reading and 7 points in math compared to 1920. This is the largest average score decline in reading since 1990, but the first ever score decline in mathematics. But for now, data presented in November of 2022 in North Carolina Legislative Committee showed that only 47% of the 3rd grade students were proficient in reading last school year. Reading at grade level, at the end of the 3rd grade, is the most single important predictor of success. So studies show that 96% of children reading at grade level by the end of the 3rd grade will graduate from high school. Now, let's look at the future. What can we do? What can we do as a community to help with the crisis of black education for our children? Let's think about it. Community leaders in our communities can play an important role by encouraging families to be involved in their child's education and learning. By forming partnerships that enhance the potential for family and community involvement in a child's education. I'm sure those of you who are sitting in this room that are teachers have said over and over again, we have to get the parents involved in their own child's education. All organizations, including the faith-based community, sororities, fraternities, are a vital source of support for many families. Parents and caregivers often look to the faith-based community leaders and organizations to share moral values, traditions, and culture while supporting educational excellence. Of these organizations, including the faith-based community, can support families in ensuring a solid foundation for children's learning and development. And number 2, empowering family members to be engaged in the child's academic success. Such as, how we do this, share traditions with children and youth through literature and the arts. Example, include children forming choirs within their community, within their churches, dance groups, the same. That way they can experience their culture as well. Creative art to promote learning and development through the performing arts. Highlight children and young adults that make positive impacts in their community. Sometimes we tend to highlight certain people kids know, and I always say, kids, when they come up to Black History Month, kids want to do musicians, they want to do athletes. But what about those African Americans who live in our community? Why are they not highlighted the same way? We have to teach our children about the history so they can use them as examples for themselves, but also that this is the legacy of their community and themselves. The other is, have your youth become engaged in community service projects. You know, this is one of the things that I say that they don't do anymore, but years and years ago, in order to be able to graduate, you had to be involved in some community service projects. That sort of gone away. And I have said that we need to make sure that our kids understand that they need to do that kind of thing. I was working with a group that I had formed, a mentoring group that I had formed in one of the high schools in Charlotte, and we were talking about college applications. And I said to them, okay, let's look at what kinds of things have you done outside of school. Not, you know, I'm not talking about sports, I'm not talking about going to parties, I'm not talking about what other kinds of things have you done to be able to help somebody else. What kind of community service project have you been involved in? I found that I had to explain to them what a community service project was. So those are some of the things, but not only the children get involved, but their parents get involved too as well. We can do food drives, we can do clothing donations, letter writing campaigns for those that are in need. The other is plan historic field trips for children to explore museums and galleries in your area to learn about the history. You got one right here in Yesel. It has been advertised this whole week. I have seen it advertised for Black History Month all week. In terms of the historic African American Museum of History and Culture located in the historic Lorry Mill. How many of you have been? How many of you have taken your children? How many of you have tried to take other groups? But this is an opportunity where you can take, this is an education piece for your children. And you can take it where they can learn. But not only they can learn, you can learn as well. If you ever have the opportunity, thinking about planning a trip outside of this area, go to Washington. You can see the Martin Luther King statue there, but you can also go to the National African American Museum of Arts and Culture in Washington, D.C. And you would be surprised in terms. And if you go, you might see somebody that you know. Encourage the community, and most of all, the parents to become knowledgeable about what's going on with their child's education. I tell parents over and over again, you send your children to school every day. But just because you send them to school every day does not mean that you need to keep abreast of what's going on in the classroom. Not only visiting, when you can, ask your children when you come home, how was your day? What did you do today? But at the same token, if there are things going on that when you have time, I understand parents are working, but at the same time, when you have time, go visit your child's classroom so you can see in terms of what's going on in their classroom. The other part of that too is what we can do is we can, not only our parents, but we can encourage and educate others in the community by getting involved in the same kinds of things. The process of changing our education system to ensure that we have quality for all children. I have this term that I've adopted the last couple of years, and I use it a lot. That we now live in what I call a selfish society. We live in a society. It's about me and mine. I say a lot in talking to groups that I've worked with over the years, and they say, well, Dot, I'm sorry, but you know, I have grandchildren now, I don't have any children, my children are all grown. And I said, but it's not about you and yours, it's about ours. So, just because your children are out, some of them are educators. Some of them have said, well, I've taught all these years, and now it's not. I said, but we just think about those children who need us. So, what I say is, let's not live in a selfish society. Let's all join in together and make sure it's not about you and yours, but it's about ours. And encourage parents to talk and listen to their children, as I said earlier. Also by participating in the PTAs, reading. This is where a lot of decisions are being made, and they need to be abreast of those decisions. But we have another crisis going on right now that I don't know if you all realize it, but in 2022, the data book shows that children in the United States are experiencing a mental health crisis. So, I say to you, and the rates of anxiety and depression are at unprecedented levels. The pandemic sure has had a lot to do with that. Due to children being isolated and not being able to participate in previous activities or be with their peers in school or in the community. So that's another question I'm going to pose to you and leave with you today is, what do we do as a community to help with these issues as well? So I'm going to analyze, and I'm going to say that my career path took me in the field of early childhood education. I felt that if I could start with children at a very young age and teach them, their teachers, administrators, and parents the importance of acceptance and tolerance, this would be the start of a solution for them to grow up and live in a world of love, unity, and peace. You have to remember, when a child is born, a child is not born knowing prejudice. It's learned and it's taught. So that's why I chose the earlier grades. And I'm saying that birth through 5, where I spent over 40 years in the field of early childhood education. So, after retiring in 2022, my journey, well, really 2012, my journey continued. I saw that not only my city, but other cities across the nation were growing at a very fast pace. And many of the things that I remember were not the same. The only thing that concerned me the most was our education system. Where were we headed? Where were we going? The diversity in many of our schools, as I said to you earlier, no more. It was a constant reminder of 66 years ago when I started this journey. Now it's time for me to be a part of the solution. So what did I do? I began to volunteer as a mentor in many of our low-performing schools, working with small groups in neighborhoods around the city for a more equal education system across the city and the nation, speaking to students in public schools as well as private schools of the importance of acceptance in education in Charlotte and other cities across the country, attending school board meetings, and advocating for better schools with equal resources for our children. So now, 66 years later, I do feel that my journey was not in vain. I feel that I did pave the way for this era for other young people to achieve that which I so desire. The journey continues as I continue to be a part of the solution that will lead to social and racial justice to our city, this country, and to fight to ensure that every child has the opportunity to receive a quality education. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me to speak on some of the history of Lincoln Academy. I've chosen to speak on the redwood trees and the saplings in the Lincoln Academy community. When we think of redwood trees, we think of the state of California. But I would like to tell you of some of the redwood educators in the Lincoln Academy community. The first redwood was Miss Emily Pruden, the founder of Lincoln Academy in 1888. Miss Pruden, a white New Englander, came to the Cross Mountain area to teach white saplings in the All Healing Springs community on the southern side of Crowder Street. When Miss Pruden noticed that the blacks on the northern side of Crowder Street had no school, she set up a school in an old log cabin for the black saplings and adults. After teaching the white saplings each day, Miss Pruden mounted a donkey and went to teach the black saplings. I consider Miss Pruden the giant of all redwood trees. The girls' dormitory at Lincoln Academy was named after Miss Pruden. Because of her declining health, Miss Pruden deeded over the school to the American Missionary Association in 1890. Miss Lillian Cathcart came to the school as principal in 1890 and served until 1910. Miss Cathcart was a hard worker in getting support for Lincoln Academy. One of the big contributors was Miss Susan Cathcart of $1,000 for a new building. The building was built in 1890 and was a combination of a boys' dorm, classrooms, and administrative building. The Cathcart building was named in her honor. In 1893, Mr. Jacob Weber was the first graduate of Lincoln Academy and became the first sapling to become a redwood. In the early 1900s, my grandparents, Elisha and Carrie Brooks, and their family lived on the side of Cottis Mountain down there. My mother attended Lincoln Academy. Excuse me. Hold on a minute. Bear with me. Get lost. Okay. There were several principals and directors who served between 1910 and 1922. One of those was Mr. I.H. Hart, who had the first electric lights installed in the buildings. In 1922, Reverend Walter Ricks became the first black principal of Lincoln Academy and also served as minister until 1935. During Reverend Ricks' administration, the school became accredited. The elementary school was built and named in honor of Miss Mildred Wellman, a Lincoln Academy graduate and a county supervisor. Also during Reverend Ricks' administration, Reed Hall, the dining hall, was built. Money given by Mr. Arthur Reed. The dining hall was a place where the junior and senior proms were held. I wish you could have seen Mr. and Mrs. Wilson floating across the floor during some of those events. The boys' dorm was built. It was called Cummings Hall. It was a 2-story building, 32 rooms, 2 baths on each floor. Also, a bell tower was built and a barn for the animals. The barn was located on the north side of the football field. Reverend Fatimore served as associate minister and teacher 1935-36. Following Dr. Fatimore were Reverend John Dillingham, 35-36, and Mr. Samuel Pern, 35-42. Mr. Pern was my principal when I entered school, the first one. Dr. Henry C. McDowell served as minister and principal from 1937 to 1942. He is responsible for steering the school during the difficult time of the Depression. Dr. McDowell brought in a group to Lincoln Academy called the NYA that built a vocational building, a canteen, athletic field, and a home for the principal. With gifts from the northern churches and friends, a school bus was purchased. Dr. McDowell also helped establish the mutual exchange. Dr. McDowell left the school in the middle of the year in the hands of Mr. Herman Twitty. Mr. Edgar D. Wilson came to Lincoln Academy in 1943 and served until 1955. Mr. Wilson served as the director, principal, teacher, disciplinarian, and he believed in his strap Susie. He was a bus driver, mechanic, electrician, carpenter, coach, and a fundraiser. 2 of the fundraisers were the Lincoln Drive and the Miss Lincoln contest. During one of the Lincoln Drives, we raised enough money to purchase an activity bus. That bus is called Black Beauty. Mr. Wilson served Lincoln Academy well. When the high school closed in 1955, the elementary school still operated with Ms. Lucille Morgan as principal until it closed in 1966. Redwood teachers. Some of the Redwood teachers while I attended were Ms. Ruth Alexander McDowell, my first grade teacher, Ms. Edna Drawn, Ms. Dorothy Weber, Ms. Grace Johns, Ms. Mary Reeves, Mr. William Alexander, Ms. Hilda Kroon Wade, Mr. Carl Roberts, Mr. J.C. Marable, Ms. Addie Jones, Ms. Mary Owens, Mr. William A. Brown, Ms. Linnea Bower, Mr. E.W. Drawn, and Ms. Margaret W. Wilson. Shirlene, consider yourself a sapling. For the adults and veterans, we had Mr. Howe, veteran vocational and agriculture teacher, and Mr. Sam Moore was the bricklaying instructor. All of these were dedicated Redwood educators. Redwood saplings. Let us pause for a moment of silence for the recent passing of a sapling in Redwood, Ms. Elsie Dunlap Neal, a Lincoln Academy historian. Thank you. May God bless the family of Elsie Dunlap McNeil. Now for the saplings. Now see if you can recognize some of the names of the parents from which these saplings came. The Adams, the Alexanders, the Barnes, the Biggers, comings, falls, goings, goods, jingles, guidance, goods, heels, hollins, pews, loves, moonies, McLeans, McDowells, McKees, McNairs, Meeks, Moores, Neelys, Ramseurs, Ricks, Rhodes, Smiths, Spencers, Starnes, Stars, Stewarts, Thomas, Twitties, Watsons, Webbers, Whammons, Whitworths, Woods, Worthies, Fronebergers. And lastly, the many Borden saplings that came from parents from all over the United States and foreign countries. After leaving Lincoln Academy, these saplings have become redwoods. I say to you, we have had redwood trees in the Lincoln Academy community. Thanks to Miss Emily Pruden, the giant of all redwoods, for the beginning of Lincoln Academy. Amen. Now, may the redwoods of Lincoln Academy smile on each of you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Yes, we are awake and excited, but I think we can give it a little bit more enthusiasm. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I love it, I love it, I love it. It has been mentioned before, but I will introduce myself again. My name is Lisa R. Withers. I first like to say thank you to Ms. McNair for inviting me to come speak on this morning, and also to Reverend McDowell as well for welcoming me into this community. As mentioned before, I am a doctoral candidate in the history department at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. I spent the past 11 years of my professional life working in various capacities at museums, historic sites, and archives, really working with African American communities in thinking of ways in how we can preserve our legacies, our history, our culture, not just for today, but also for our generations to come in the future. And so what brings me here today is that I have been honored to be selected by the Gaston County Museum, located here in this area in Dallas, North Carolina, who have embarked on a project, actually not a project, I would say it's an initiative, because it's a long-range plan to increase the amount of knowledge that is shared and known about African American history here in Gaston County. And so, of course, with an initiative that big, you have to do it in phases. And so in this first phase, the museum was able to be the recipient of a national grant administered by the American Historical Association and the National Endowment for the Humanities to be able to start this process of being able to carefully record and work with community members to understand what is considered important to know about the Black experience here in Gaston County. And so as I mentioned, this is an ongoing project. This is just phase one. So of course you can't do everything at one time. And so the museum has identified 4 places to start on this endeavor, including the home place of John Biggers, who is also the studio of Jim Biggers, the 2 colored hospitals in Gastonia, North Carolina, the First Baptist Church of Dallas, North Carolina, and this hallowed ground that we are on today, the home of Lincoln Academy. And so, where do I come in? So I've been tasked to connect with all the various organizations, individuals, community members involved with each of these 4 locations. and to be able to undergo a process of recording the story. Now, we just heard the outline, the story of Lincoln Academy. But I have a question. As a young person in the room listening to a story, I also want to know, who were these teachers? Clearly, they left such a significant impact on everyone who was here. For those who still remember them, my question is, what are we going to be able to have for the children and the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren so that they will also know how special, the Redwoods of the generation were and how they crafted and molded the individuals here who called Crowder's Mountain home. I also ask, what are some of the memories of individuals who intimately know this place that you have of this place? Because there's more to the history than when it was built. There's also the lived experiences, and that's part of what I am hoping to be able to partner with various individuals who are interested in this project to also be able to preserve. Is also, what does this place mean to this community, to sharing the story and the legacy of African Americans here in Gaston County, but more importantly to Crowder's Mountain and right here within the Lincoln Academy community. And so there are multiple ways in which we are gathering this information. One, you may have seen a paper that's been floating around, looks like a sign-up sheet. We are hoping to have a community forum, and I say hope because we have a date in mind, Wednesday, March the 22nd. However, it's not set in stone, but that is the date that we're looking at. And so what we're asking is for anyone who has intimate knowledge of Lincoln Academy in this community, if we might be able to gather in a town hall style fashion to be able to share those stories, have the young people come and to hear the stories of what was it like to be a student here. What was it like to attend classes, be in the dining hall? What did you do after class hours? Where did the people come from? I heard there are people from all over the United States and internationally. That definitely piqued my curiosity. Not only where they come from, but how did they learn about the school? Learning all these different questions that also not just enrich the story, but also let generations 2 and 3 generations from now also be able to hold on to the meaning of this place and all of its richness. So that's one way of having a town hall. The second way is by doing one-on-one recorded interviews. One of the things that I'll be doing in the spring of this year is going around Gaston County for anyone who is interested in participating and just recording an interview that talks about these stories, because that'll be another way that we can preserve these stories that are so vital to our community's history and heritage as well. And then lastly, the museum has a web page. That's either live or going to be live very soon. It is live. Just want to make sure I tell the right thing. So we understand, it is 2023. A lot of people are busy. There's a lot of things going on, but that doesn't mean that you cannot participate if you're not able to come to the town hall meeting or do a one-on-one interview. You can go to the Gaston County Museum's website and submit a story, whether that might be a voice recording you want to do, or if you want to sit and craft a written narrative that you want to submit. So that's also another way in how community members can participate in this endeavor. Last but not least, I realize a lot of the ways in that we mentioned participating in this project as really for people who with direct connection. But even for individuals who may not have been an alum or may not have been directly tied to this community, you can also share your voice and help shape the way in how an entity such as the museum is able to preserve this knowledge. In the foyer for the doorway, there is a survey. If you want to provide some insight and say, these are some people, this is what should be included in Gaston County African American history. As I mentioned, this is just the first phase. The museum is committed to having a multi-phase approach, this is a long-term initiative to increasing the knowledge of what is known about African American communities and history here in the county. And so by providing your input, your insights on that, that also will give the museum staff guidance on what should be included to be sure that there is a whole and truthful telling of the Black experience in this part of the state. And so I thank you so very much for your time and attention this morning. Thank you to Ms. McNair and Reverend McDowell for allowing me to come. In addition to filling out a survey, and on Sign Sheet there's also rap cards in the front. Feel free to take one with you. Tell friends and family, anyone you think who may be interested. I will also be around afterwards, and I hope to be able to connect with each and every one of you. Thank you so much.
All right, I am back to share with you a poem entitled Black History. And Pastor, I promise I'll use my teacher voice. So, you mean to tell me that someone down your ancestry line survived being chained to other human bodies for several months in the bottom of a disease-infested ship during the Middle Passage, lost their language, customs, and traditions, picked up the English language as best they could while working free of charge from sunup to sundown as they watched babies sold from out of their arms and women raped by ruthless slave owners. Took names with no last names, no birth certificates, no heritage of any kind. Braved the Underground Railroad, survived the Civil War to enter sharecropping, learned to read and write out of sheer will and determination, faced the burning crosses of the KKK, averted their eyes at the black bodies swinging from ropes hung on trees, fought in world wars as soldiers to return to America as boys, marched in Birmingham, posed in Selma, jailed in Wilmington, assassinated in Memphis, segregated in the South, ghettoed in the North, ignored in history books, stereotyped in Hollywood. And in spite of all, someone in your family line endured every era to make sure you would get here. And you received one rejection, faced one obstacle, lose one friend, get overlooked, and you want to quit? How dare you entertain the very thought of quitting? People you will never know survived from generation to generation so that you could succeed. Don't you dare let them down. We're going to have another selection by later.
For this selection, I've chosen Lift Me Up, as featured in the recent film, Black Panther Wakanda Forever. If you stayed around for the credits, you would have heard it.
Or on radio.
Because it's such a lush sound, I could not play it solo. So I have recorded myself, and I'll be duetting with myself today.
But we want to take time out to say thank you for those of you who participated and were willing to be speakers as well as participate in our program. So first up, I want to call up Mrs. Dorothy Count Scoggins. If you will come up for us, please. Make sure you guys have the cameras ready. We just want to express our appreciation and offer a token of appreciation. Take your time. Say thank you. I learned a lot today. I'm not from this area, so that was definitely a lot of information that I learned, and I'm interested in just hear more and just sit at your feet and just be able to learn more. So thank you very much. What's in it? We'll put them in the car.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Lemuel, if you'll come to the front, please. Again, thank you for sharing all of your amazing knowledge. I saw a lot of head nods in the audience, so I imagine that a lot of you experienced this history with him as well, but thank you so much for your time spent with us today, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And next up, we're going to call Lisa, Miss Lisa R. Withers. It's like she does, I don't even say anything. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And lastly, your amazing talent. So next up, we're going to have our congregational rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing. And it's in your programs, everybody has to.
Rejoicing, rise, rise, in a lovely, lovely repast which is available to you. And there's more food than you can eat. Much more. And so, take out boxes, not simply are going to be provided, but are requested. Take advantage of them. Please, take advantage of them. And now, we give God the glory. We give God the glory for educators. We give God the glory for Phi Kappa Delta. Phi Delta Kappa. We give God the glory and thanksgiving for the Gaston County Museum, the Afro-American Museum of Culture and Arts. We give God the glory and thank God for the Scoggins Counts.
Yes.
And
Yes.
all who hold high the banner and continue the struggle for justice. For justice. We give thanks to God for the opportunity to be present today.
Yes.
To remember from whence we have come. And our responsibility to ensure that others make it a little better than themselves.
Yes.
Thanks be to thee, O God. Thanks be to thee for the persistence of a people, despite oppression, despite a constantly changing field of goals. Thanks be to God for each and every one who nourished us and challenged us and chastised us when we needed it. Thanks be to God. May we go now from this place with its rich history of inspiration. May we go now and be those who inspire. So may it be now, even till the end of time itself. Amen?
Amen.